Folks, this is definitely a different conversation than I've typically had. I'm excited to introduce two folks today. A good friend, James Maskell, who I've known for years, who's really kind of a visionary in functional medicine and really has helped to grow that industry nationally and internationally. And someone who's new to me, Dr. Kristine Burke, and I'm just going to read a little bit about her background. Dr. Burke is a board certified in family medicine. She's fellowship trained and board certified in sports medicine. And she's got a third board certification in integrative medicine. Definitely an underachiever. To the point of this conversation, she's a co-principal investigator in a trial called the EVANTHEA trial. It's the first randomized controlled trial to really evaluate a precision medicine approach to early cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. And that's going to be the focus of our conversation here. And let me just say, the way this whole conversation came about was I was having dinner with James a couple of weeks ago, and he was so excited. He pulled out this study that was going to be published, and there were two or three things about it that really piqued my interest. The first was that Dr. Burke, was using a whole battery of tests that were looking at drivers or factors for cognitive decline that I wasn't aware of. And I mean, a huge battery, which we'll go into. And I was very, very interested in this. I think it falls into what might be called precision medicine, which I'm going to ask Dr. Burke to define for us. The second thing that really piqued my interest was that the outcomes that they were achieving in the study using precision medicine, looking at these factors and then solving for them or resolving for these factors, was better than anything to date, including medication treatment, including even lifestyle medicine. And so that really piqued my interest. So, here I am sitting, having dinner with James. And again, I'm familiar with functional medicine. I'm familiar with integrative medicine. I'm somewhat familiar with precision medicine. But this is really something that I think we need to talk about. If in fact we're seeing better outcomes using precision medicine and integrative medicine, I, for one, want to know something about it, and I want to share with you. So, Dr. Burke, I'm sorry for the long intro, but if you could first define integrative medicine, and in particular, what is precision medicine?
So integrative medicine really at its core is just taking kind of the best of all the worlds, the best of conventional medicine, of, botanical medicine, of, sometimes traditional Chinese medicine, for example, just taking all of these healing strategies and implementing what's going to create hopefully the best outcomes for your patient. Mm-hmm. And precision medicine is in a way a very data-driven approach to utilizing those tools. So if integrative medicine becomes the tools that you're using, precision medicine is the data driving system behind that. So in precision medicine, you're evaluating someone's genetics, you're looking at their environmental exposures across their lifetime, you're looking at their lifestyle choices, and then you're looking at their physiologic balance and imbalance. And then you're creating a treatment or an intervention system that addresses all of those factors.
Kristine, and I hope you don't mind me calling you by your first name. So my name is Zev. So Kristine, I'm going to be totally transparent here. One of the things, so I talk to a lot of experts, and what generally starts to make me believe something has some merit is when I hear more than 2 or 3 or 4 experts saying the same thing, coming from different perspectives. And I have to say, when James showed me your protocol and all these different drivers and all these different tests that you were looking at, one of them was toxins in the environment. And I had heard from a highly reputable nutrition physician, well-known, I won't mention his name here, but probably one of the top 5 to 10 in the world in terms of his background and research, et cetera. And one of the things he said just in a conference he was in was that he had seen a patient with dementia, and they tested for mercury, found higher levels of mercury. and essentially eliminated fish from her diet. And literally, the dementia, the cognitive decline went away. It reversed, and I think completely, and or near that. And to me, again, this is not a small issue. Cognitive decline, dementia. And I'd love for you to speak to the prevalence of this. Is quite prevalent, and my understanding is it's increasing in prevalence. That more and more people, which is makes me think this is not something that's inherent in me, that I'm going to have cognitive decline. There's a lot of other factors that are contributing to the increase. And so let us understand those factors and let us begin to test those factors. And, and when I heard that story, then I looked at your protocol and saw, in fact, that one of the categories was environmental toxins and mercury. And again, who doesn't eat fish, right? All of us, you go on, you hear these nutritionists, they're all eating fish every day. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe that's not the greatest idea in the world. So anyway, let me go back to you in terms of, again, maybe we could dive into what are these different areas, an example of these precision medicine factors or these buckets of areas.
Yeah, so if you think about cognitive decline as more of a network problem, so it's not a single target, it's more of a network insufficiency that develops. So we have all of these various drivers of dysfunction. And then we also have, because this is generally occurring in an aging person, although I will say it's occurring more and more frequently in younger people. We had people even in their 40s and 50s in the study. So, but you're looking at, generally speaking, an aging population. So you have the changes of senescence that are going on, cellular senescence, immune senescence, a loss in the ability to respond. And then you have this accumulation of all these various drivers. So the things we're looking at are things like metabolically driven inflammation, where we have, we've heard Alzheimer's referred to as type 3 diabetes before. It is a factor. It is a driver. It's not the it thing. We really have this reductionist approach in medicine that, developed largely out of our successes in the antibiotic era, where if we identified something and we could identify it specifically enough, then we could apply a single treatment and we could have success, which is true in those cases, but it does not work in chronic degenerative diseases like cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. So metabolically driven inflammation, blood sugar dysregulation, chronic insulin resistance that ends up creating excess body fat and insulin resistance in the brain, which impacts the ability to generate ATP, the energy that you need to be able to defend against the drivers or to be able to repair damage that's happened. So we have that class. We have our nutrients and mitochondrial function tagged into the last one. But we, at least in my training, and I would expect also in yours, we get so little education on nutrition beyond just, what you might want to do to try to, lower your cholesterol and then the deficiency diseases that happen in underserved areas. But we really don't look at the wide spectrum of dysfunction that can occur when we're missing certain nutrients or combinations of nutrients. So looking at those things, optimizing those things, looking at the mitochondrial function, trying to ensure that the cells can generate energy to do the work that we're going to ask. Then looking at the hormonal support, the entire spectrum of hormones, thyroid balance, sex hormone balance, cortisol balance. All of these things contribute in different ways, either to trophic support, like in the case of estrogen, for example, stimulating neuroplasticity, stimulating the genesis of new connections between neurons. Or, in the case of thyroid, conventionally, we know that hypothyroidism is one of the treatable causes of dementia. So we understand this at a certain level, but we tend to look at it like we're searching for this single target, and it's a variety of targets. Then we have our cardiovascular health, because the blood-brain barrier is critically important in protecting the brain from the accumulation of whether it's toxins like we've mentioned, or it's heavy metals, or it's the metabolically driven inflammatory things like IL-6 and TNF-alpha. All of these things create an inflammatory environment in the brain, and then that inflammation creates damage. And over time, the body loses the ability to compensate for that, right? It can't balance it. We lose some of our immune regulation, and we just have this perpetuation of damage. Then we've got the biome and the biotoxins, like we mentioned earlier. So biologically produced toxins, like from mold, for example, we've actually found
Mm,
that mold and the accumulation of the toxins they produce, called mycotoxins in the body, is one of the heaviest weights
mm,
driving cognitive decline. And then we have the microbiome, the gut
mhm,
microbiome, the oral microbiome. There's certain types of bacteria that can
mm,
colonize the gums called Porphyromonas gingivalis. Those create a toxin that's directly damaging to the brain and damaging to the microglia, the immune cells in the brain. And then we have the chemical toxins. So those are
mm,
the things like we talked about, the heavy metals, but it could also be things like persistent organic pollutants, for example, or
right.
pesticides,
Yeah.
herbicides. These are all things that aren't native to the body, right? They're xenobiotics, foreign to the body. And so,
Mhm.
whether you think they're toxic or poisonous or not, they're a chemical the body has to get rid of. And that process of getting rid of things is very energy dependent. So, you start to see this pattern where you have this increasing load of things that the body has to be able to deal with and a decreasing capacity to be able to counter those things. And it's that
Mm.
combination, that network insufficiency, that ultimately leads to, in this case, neurodegeneration.
So you, Dr. Burke and James, you live in this world. You've been in this world for decades. As someone who has been in more the traditional world of healthcare, you're really blowing me away with this. And I'm excited and at the same time quite agitated because if I were to take a relative to the doctor for cognitive decline or dementia, to the traditional primary care or even specialist, I don't believe they would have that list of the different factors, the metabolic factors, the nutrient and mitochondrial factors, the hormonal factors, the cardiovascular health, the inflammatory, the microbiome, and then the internal and external toxins. You have a whole list of different driving factors for cognitive decline. And in each one of those, you have tests that you do to see not if one of these, but how many of these different factors. And so that's to me, this is such a marked difference from what we are doing in the traditional medical realm, which seems to me, hearing you is grossly inadequate to what we need to be doing, which is looking at these multiple causative factors, testing for them, identifying which ones, again, precision medicines are inherent, are the problems with me, and then doing something about them. So here you are. So in this EVANTHEA trial, so you're testing for this wide variety of causative factors that it goes way beyond what traditional physicians or in medicine might test for. But then, so what do you do? Does each one have a different treatment? And then, given that you might have multiple ones, so you treat multiple factors. Kind of curious about that part, the treatment part.
Yeah, so what we did in the trial, so it was people that were 45 to 76 years old, and they had to, meet the inclusion and exclusion criteria. That
Mm,
included, several batteries of cognitive testing, and then and a brain MRI. And we also we did ask them to be willing to change mold in their homes. So there was, a little bit of a selection there for people who were willing to do work, and they had to be willing to change their lifestyle and take supplements and take medications if those were appropriate. So that was
mhm,
kind of in a nutshell our selection process. Then we did, once we randomized them either to
mhm,
receive the precision medicine intervention or to receive the standard of care intervention, then in our precision group, we did a huge battery of tests so that right off the bat, you get
mhm,
a sense of the degree of imbalance across multiple systems, what the high value targets may be, really based on the experience of there were six clinical co-principal investigators. And then we set about targeting those drivers. And usually we go at it in a certain order where we want to, reduce inflammation, then we want to start rebuilding, we want to provide the nutrients that are missing and calm down that inflammatory process. You're trying to slow the ongoing damage at the same time that you're trying to rebuild the system. So it's a very data heavy, like we talked
yes.
about, and it is a very labor intensive process. But when you do those things, the
Mhm,
results are spectacular. And I had three family members that have died of this disease. So I've lived the helplessness and the
Hmm.
hopelessness. And
Hmm.
it's amazing to be able to give this gift to people.
So sorry to hear about that. But it is, I mean, most people I talk to have a family member or someone close to them that has cognitive decline dementia. It's actually, it's frightening. You make me just to step out a second. We're seeing, for instance, I was just talking to an oncologist about this. We're seeing cancer now affecting people in their 40s. We didn't see that before. We did not see that before, and so the trend is really frightening. The prevalence is increasing now. Granted, we have better treatments for it, but thank you very much. I'd rather not have the cancer than know that you have a good treatment for it. I'd rather not get it or prevent it. And I think we're seeing. Do you have any stats at hand in terms of the prevalence of cognitive decline and dementia, and is it growing? Is it staying the same? What's the story there?
It's actually growing exponentially. So
Wow.
right now we have about 7.2 million Americans that have diagnosed Alzheimer's disease, probably twice that number that are not yet diagnosed. And when you look at all cognitive decline, we're at well over 20 million just in this country alone. The cost of care is over a $500 million, and it's projected to triple, approximately triple by 2050. That's only 25 years from now.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is, yeah, it will financially devastate most healthcare systems in countries across the world because the cost of care is tremendous. So
Mhm.
anything that we can do that can alter this trajectory is going to have a tremendous societal impact.
What were your outcomes?
So the outcomes in the study, about 91% of the participants had improvement, which is a miracle.
Hmm.
And then we had statistically significant improvements in multiple cognitive assessments. So, something called the neurocognitive index, which is an overall cognitive function score in executive functioning, in composite memory. And these were all with p values of 0.001.
Hmm.
So, highly statistically significant. We had dramatic reductions in symptom burden, both
Hmm.
as reported by the subjects themselves and also as rated by their study partner, which was generally, a loved one, a spouse, a family member, a partner that they lived with. And just tremendous improvements in other health markers, improvements in hemoglobin A1C, blood sugar regulation, weight loss,
Hmm.
improvements in blood pressure, people getting off blood pressure medications, getting off of pain medications. One of the subjects had two joint replacement surgeries planned, both of them canceled because he didn't need them anymore because his pain was gone and his function
Hmm.
was back. So, some really, really remarkable systemic health effects as well, which makes sense because you're really
Yeah.
just dealing with the things that create degeneration. It just so happens that that degeneration in these people gets most highly expressed in their brain, right? Brain
Right.
degeneration is the biggest piece of their puzzle.
Well, it's funny you said it because I was just thinking that literally that it seems to me that these causative factors are not, whether they be inflammatory, toxins, et cetera, hormonal, metabolic, nutritional. They're manifesting in cognitive decline and dementia, but the truth is they're also impacting other things as well in our body, cardiovascular health, et cetera. So it does. I'm not surprised to hear that when you treated these factors, that other things also got better, not just the cognitive decline.
You raise a very interesting point, and I think, at least the way that I have rationalized this in my own mind in providing this care is with most things, there's an initial very expensive phase where those who have the financial wherewithal are able to access it. And then through things like this study, which we're, about to have published,
Mhm.
and through people who have the wherewithal to invest in it, we can start to prove the model has benefit. And then from there becomes a demand, and then the demand creates the pathway. Because you really have to be able to show that investing in this intervention makes a big difference. Like, for example, in my primary care practice, which I still do, but all from this perspective, through this precision and functional medicine lens, We went 12 years without a single heart attack in our practice. Because when you pay attention to the drivers, the inflammatory drivers in particular, that are the cause of most events, right? 85% of cardiovascular events occur because of a ruptured plaque, an inflamed, fragile plaque that ruptures, not because of progressive clogging of the pipes like we're typically looking for. And so when you focus your attention there, you can have these tremendous outcomes where you see it coming, you're able to divert it, and the events don't happen. So I think the same is true with what we're doing in the brain health arena. And the same is true in what we're doing in trying to, stave off the tsunami of autoimmune diseases that we see right now. That comes back to our earlier conversation about the immune regulation. And we don't have time to get into all that today, but there's so much potential power that we have in this process, in this way of doing things, that it will eventually just become imperative. Because like you said, once people learn about this, which is the same thing that happened to me, like once I learned that I could actually help people get better instead of prescribing their third hypertensive, antihypertensive med and their, second cholesterol lowering drug, then it's super empowering for the clinician as well, which then, right, awakens that passion that we all have to be healers, which is why we endured the training that we endured in the first place.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful.
James?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Zev, look, the first thing we have to do is we have to think, do we understand this disease, right? And, when Kristine talks about network insufficiency as a way of understanding dementia, this is a new way of understanding it. I mean, there's no better way, no better example than the 2026 Alzheimer's drug pipeline, right? Where you have all these drugs that are in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trial, and you see all of them, and you look over at the key, and you see there's 15 different mechanisms of action that are being tested. So either one of them is right, and all the rest are wrong. And my judgment is we would have already known if that had happened, or it's a little bit of all of them, and you have to understand which one is affecting the person in front of you. That is a complete paradigm shift. It doesn't really matter what it costs now. We have to understand the mechanism of how this occurs. Once we understand it, we can then make it cheaper. The first car is the Tesla Roadster, and then you have the Tesla 3 or 4 generations later. But you have to be in the business of understanding how to make it work, and then over time it'll be available to everyone. And that's the journey that we're going on with True Neuro. And part of the reason why I was there in Charlotte is we're now building like state networks of clinics that understand this operating system as a starting point and are excited and willing to have the intellectual curiosity to go further to now be able to do what Dr. Burke can do. And she's stepping into the role of mentorship now. And at True Neuro, half of it is the software, gathering the data, making it more efficient, going through those Tesla iterations. And the other side is mentorship. What are the order of operations? What have I learned from doing hundreds and hundreds of these cases? And ultimately, for any doctor that is excited or clinician is excited to go on that journey, we're here to support them.
Yeah, no, this is super exciting. And I really appreciate both of you, the sort of transparency and the broad picture that we don't have the answers here. We're not sure where are the mechanisms. And I think you're beginning to look for pattern recognition. And I think that's where the fun of the science is going to come in. Your research is like, it's going to start to appear as the numbers get larger. I also appreciate the notion that you're starting with, let's first show that this works and demonstrate it, develop that, expand it, and once we do that, sort of build it and they will come. We'll figure out how to pay for it later and how to divert the funds to prevention rather than reaction. How can people? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Kristine. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna. You asked me earlier about the cost, and I tangented myself and did not get to that answer. But it costs, if somebody already has cognitive decline, it costs probably about $40,000 to pull them back from that, and that could be a little bit more, that could be a little bit less, but think about the cost of memory care, at least where we live in California, is about $10,000 to $12,000 a month. So if we can delay memory care, just memory care, by 4 months, that's paid for itself. But if we can actually bring you back to significantly better cognitive function, or even sometimes to normal, which we do see, then you have an entirely different quality of life. And all of the thousands and thousands of dollars that would have been spent on your care now get to be utilized by you, by your family, by your heirs, right? It's really, it's so hard to prove that you've prevented something from happening, but we do have enough data on the typical progressions that we can start to model these things out. Dr. Bredesen, one of my mentors, often says once you have this disease, there is no inexpensive way out. So what people often want is, it's not that bad. If I can just stay like this, it's okay. But that option's not on the table. It's like having cancer. You can't, if you don't treat it, then it's going to progress. And that's the same with this disease. There isn't the option to just accept the modest decline that you have now. It will continue to accelerate, and it gets worse more quickly as time goes by.
Yeah. And, now we're getting into healthcare economics, which, I'm no expert in, but I think this is actually even more poignant than the cancer, issue, because in cancer people die. And so the cost actually is eliminated, from an economic financial point of view. In this disease, people live, and they live for a long time. And to your point, it's incredibly expensive with memory care and the support needed. And forget about the toll it has on families. And I've seen this both with patients' families and friends' families. The cost is, personally is just, I think it far outweighs even the financial cost. And so the notion that, yes, this is expensive, I think what I hear you saying, yes, it's expensive to prevent or to reverse. However, it's a lot less expensive than not doing it. And I think that's your bottom line there, which makes a lot of sense. Yes, James.
I just say, so, based on what Kristine said earlier, it's exponentially increasing. So that means that in 2050, if nothing moves differently, everyone either has Alzheimer's or is looking after someone with Alzheimer's. And that is a complete collapse of our whole society. So there is an imperative right now to get on this and do something about it and understand the drivers. And in the vision that we have, no one ever gets to a MoCA score of 15, because as soon as it goes from 20 to 25, you intervene at that stage where it's reasonably cheap, where it looks more like lifestyle medicine and less like precision medicine, but you understand the drivers at that stage. And we're getting there. Ultimately, you need a system to understand why people start on the beginning of that journey so that they never get that low. And that is what has to happen for societal stability and renewal. And that is why Kristine and I are 100% focused on this. And we have to start by really understanding what drives it, because we're completely out to lunch at this point.
Yeah. Let me just give you one other set of statistics that'll make it more real for people who are listening or watching. If you make it to age, so your overall lifetime risk of getting Alzheimer's disease is approximately 11%, so about 1 in 10 people. If you're age 65, that's now 1 in 5. 1 in 5. And if you reach age 85, it's 1 in 2. So this isn't just something that's going to happen to other people. This is going to happen to a lot of people. Yeah, it's staggering. The numbers are staggering.
So if you're 65, the chance is you have a bunch of 65-year-olds, 1 in 5 of you is going to get this. If you have a bunch of 80-year-olds, 1 out of every 2 is going to get cognitive decline or dementia. These numbers are staggering, I think, and the fact that over the next 30 years or so, the older population, that demographic is increasing. So this is not a problem that's going away. It's going to get worse. Last question, and by the way, can't thank you guys enough for your work, for your dedication, for your perseverance. This is not something that happens overnight. You've been doing this for quite a few years. So Dr. Burke, we really want to thank you. James, again, been a big fan of yours, and I'm so, now I understand your passion around this specific issue, and I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk. If others are interested in finding out more about the trial or about this research or this area, or contacting folks that, if they have a family member, what can people access?
The best place is to go to trueneura.com, TRUNEURA.com. At the top, you can see there's a banner that will take you to the preprint of the study. If you're a precision functional medicine clinician or someone who's interested in learning more about it, you can get a demo and meet us there. We're also building the beginning of a practitioner finder, because there's a lot of people like you who are, looking for this kind of work. And ultimately, our first goal for the rest of this year is to build the nationwide network. So there's a clinician in every state and then in every city. And ultimately, eventually True Neura can be used by any medical system and medical organization that wants to deliver this. I think the natural home for this kind of care is in senior living and assisted living in those areas, because you have existing community. And my previous work was looking at group medical visits and how do you make medicine more efficient for chronic illness. I think that's a big part of where we're going. But the first thing we need to do is get enough data into the system of reversals to understand what are the key drivers for each phenotype. And that's why we're really focused right now on working with clinics that already have a background in functional, integrative, or precision medicine.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Dr. Burke, last word?
Well, definitely have hope, because I think people ignore early symptoms. They attribute them like, oh, I'm just like all my friends, like I'm more forgetful, but so is everyone around me. But now you know those statistics is because everyone around you is also experiencing cognitive decline starting to show. And so you want to understand what your drivers are, because they are modifiable. It is no longer the case that cognitive decline is inevitable. We now have the power to change this process, and you need to look to know.
For me, that was really the message, that cognitive decline is not inevitable and it is reversible, and incredibly encouraging. Super excited about this. And again, thank you so much.